Hi, my name's Finn. I'm a flight instructor from Redhill in Surrey, is where I do pretty much most of my flying at the moment out of. And if you've not been there before, I'd really recommend going. It's this amazing little, mainly grass airfield, sort of nestled in the just south of the North Downs. It's really close to Gatwick. If you want to go on holiday, it's probably cheaper to park your plane than your car. If you want access to London, I think it's pretty good as well. It's only about once you get to the station, it's only about 40 minutes into the centre of London. So it's a great little airfield. And if you just want to stop there as the airfield being your destination, there's a great cafe where you can sit out and watch tons of planes and tons of helicopters, all different sorts, fly by. You can nerd to your heart's desire. So I'd really recommend going. But I'll tell you one of the things when I was first flying around the southeast of England, I always wanted to go to Redhill, and I was always a bit put off and yeah, a bit put off by the amount of airspace, and it looked like a really complicated place to go. I can tell you it with a bit of planning, it isn't. And what we're going to do today is I'm going to go through, share some of my knowledge from operating there for a while, and basically show how you can have a nice, stress-free, easy visit to Redhill. So maybe you've never been there. Maybe you operate from there yourself, and you only ever go one direction, not the other, because you're worried about the airspace restrictions. Maybe you're a student flying from Redhill, and I don't know, up to this point, have just lent on your instructor, and your instructor takes responsibility for avoiding airspace. Whichever situation you're in, what I'm going to do today is share some of my top tips for avoiding infringing airspace at Redhill. So I've got a chart here of the area. This is just essentially a photograph of the chart with Redhill there in the centre. Now, let's quickly just talk about the airspace that surrounds Redhill. The most obvious one is the Gatwick's airspace here, where they've got a CTR down to the ground to the south of the airfield, and then the CTA goes down to 1,500 feet in this area here. And it's not the only bits of airspace around Redhill. We've got the new Farnborough airspace around here out to the west. We've got the London CTR here to the north, the city zone as well, just off the top of the map there. And also you've got a Kenley gliding area, a hang gliding site here, and a very busy general aviation airport, Biggin Hill here. So there's quite a lot around the airport. And I'm going to split this video into sort of three real parts. First, I'm going to talk about if you're arriving departing from the east, and then I'm going to talk about arriving departing from the west, and then quickly a little bit about being in the circuit at Redhill and how to avoid infringing in any of those three areas. So first, we're going to talk about the east. There's two VRPs used when going to and from Redhill to the east, and that's Godstone here and Godstone railway station. Now, they've got really similar names. Now, Godstone, let me show you on the map, is just this sort of long, thin town going north-south with a motorway junction at the top. This is just Google Earth, what it looks like. And there's a really visible quarry just to the west of it, especially visible when you're arriving from the east. And then Godstone railway station, to give its correct name, is just a couple miles south. And you can see it's just by these houses here. There's a train station. It's pretty visible as well. It's on this big, really visible, you can see it's railway line, and you see it's dead straight. It stretches for miles. And it makes it really easy to sort of pick up and follow. So these are the two visual reporting points you like to use. And it's going to make sense which one you're given. If we're on runway 26, you normally arrive via Godstone station and depart via Godstone. Now, you may, if you're departing or arriving, be really tempted to just route via Sevenoaks. I'd probably recommend you don't, and you use Bow Beach Reservoir instead. You can see we've got quite a lot of restricted airspace and busy airfields here, just to the north of the M25. You've got the Kenley gliding site, which deserve a wide berth so they can do their glider launching, and there's hang gliding here as well, and I occasionally see them on the ridge here just north of M25. And also you got Biggin Hill, which is really busy. A lot of their instrument traffic comes in on this ILS, but they're getting a new approach soon, which I've got the proposed routing for here. And you can see it brings the aircraft around the bottom of Kenley, right up against its airspace, and they'll be about 2,000 feet. So if you're thinking you can just route to Godstone, which is about here, and then follow the M25 at about 2,000 feet, I'd recommend probably not, because you're going to be in the way of these guys arriving on the new 03 approach, and because of the horrifically disorganized airspace in this area, is you won't be speaking to them on the same frequency, so you've no idea they're there. And actually, this is probably a good reason to get yourself an ADSB in or out device. And even if the winds aren't from the north and Biggin Hill aren't using 03 or they haven't got their new approach yet, a lot of VFR traffic departs Biggin Hill and goes straight to Sevenoaks. And because of noise abatement procedures, they're not allowed to turn until they've got about 2 miles away from Biggin. So what they tend to do is turn left about here and follow just above the motorway towards Sevenoaks, towards the lakes where they tend to go. So you really don't want to be routing along this little gap along the M25. There's not really much room between the Biggin ATZ, and if you're considering climbing, which you probably want to be because there's some high ground, then actually this gap is really small. You're quite likely to come a bit too close to Gatwick's CTA here. So probably there's one other reason as well I'd recommend not routing Sevenoaks, and that's if you route a bit further south along this ridge here, maybe you'll want to be at about 1,300 feet. Redhill Air Traffic Control will ask you to be below 1,400 feet. Gatwick airspace starts at 1,500. You don't want to be too low because that just removes a lot of your options. But 200 feet seems like a sensible buffer. And in fact, that's what NATS and the CAA say you should do in their old Take 2 guidance here. They say take 200 feet or 2 nautical miles. Now, in some of this airspace, 2 nautical miles isn't possible. 200 feet mostly is. And I would argue that over this ridge, which goes up in places to, what's this, 820 feet, that you're quite unlikely to be able to fulfill the 500-foot rule over that 820-foot section, and certainly over most of it. So really, Bow Beach Reservoir down here is an excellent unofficial visual reporting point to head towards. And actually, if you mention this to Farnborough or Biggin or Redhill, they'll know where it is and all about it. And it's perfectly aligned with the airspace boundary here as well. So once you get to Bow Beach, and actually I'd recommend getting a little bit past Bow Beach, you can climb up to then the basic controlled airspace goes up to 2,500 feet. So, I'd recommend going to a max 2,300. Do be careful, because often when you're flying along, if a landmark goes beneath the nose of the aircraft, doesn't actually mean you've arrived there. Sometimes that means you can still be a couple of miles away. So maybe make sure it's not just beneath the nose of the aircraft, but you've passed it. It's not outside your window anymore. And I'd give yourself a good mile before you climb up, and make sure you descend if you're descending down before you get there. Another good thing to do that's very unofficial is if you're expecting to be routed to or from Godstone Railway Station, then I'd normally expect pilots to kind of get to the southern point of the lake here. And if you're going to from Godstone, I'd expect pilots to probably route via the top. And then you end up with a sort of one-way system going in opposite directions, because it can be a bit of a busy patch of airspace. But that's not official. And as we spoke about this before, this lovely railway line here that you can follow, that keeps you out of Gatwick's CTR here, where the airspace goes down to the surface. And you can see here on Google Earth, I showed it to you a second ago, how visible that east-west railway line is. And to be honest, I wouldn't really want to be flying south of that railway line. I know there's the advice that when you're following a line feature like that, to stay to the right. But if I'm flying to the east along this railway line, I'll stay on it, or maybe a couple of meters to the north of it. So to just finalise and conclude what we've spoken about when arriving and departing Redhill from the east, is best bet to just follow this kind of valley to and from Bow Beach Reservoir. Stay at 1,300 feet, so you've got yourself a 200-foot buffer from this airspace here. Wait until you get past Bow Beach, or make sure you've descended in time before you get to Bow Beach to avoid the airspace, and keep this railway line to your south, even though normally we wouldn't. And once you've passed Bow Beach, maybe you can change to flying to the right of it. And those, I'd say, are the best ways to just make sure you don't infringe controlled airspace to the east. One other thing I would say is when you're arriving and departing Redhill, especially when runway 25 or 36 and 18 are in use, just be a bit careful that you don't infringe this little bit of controlled airspace here. Really good website to go to when you're going to and from Redhill is the Redhill Aerodrome website. Go to the pilot's info and operational information, and you can download. I really recommend having these on your keypads when you're going to and from Redhill. And what I would say is, when you're cleared from South Cotton Railway Station, just follow the railway line until you get onto the centre line, as per this, when they clear you for the straight in, just in case you end up cutting this corner here of airspace. And then probably the harder bit to get right is when you're landing on 36, joining from South Cotton Railway Station, is aiming at the right point to get that base join right. Now, what you can see here on this map is, I don't know if you can see, that's quite small, is there's a farm here. And what's brilliant about this farm is it has a pond. Let me just find Redhill again and the pond, which makes it kind of quite visible from the air, especially if the sun's glinting on it. And so really what you want to do is just keep following along this railway line until you've picked up a farm with the pond, and then fly straight towards that. And then that should keep you north of the airspace boundary, which is a few hundred meters down to the south here. And in another video, we'll talk about more detail the 1836 circuit. But fly towards that farm and make sure you're not at right angles to the runway on your base leg, but actually parallel to the runway 2608. Then that will keep you clear of controlled airspace. And if you're departing this southerly runway, so departing runway 18, just once you get over the airfield boundary, once you're at a decent height, make a climbing left-hand turn to be parallel with the two runways, and then just fly here until you pick up the railway line, and then turn right down towards Coston Station is my advice for staying out of airspace on those difficult days when we're using the north-south runway. Okay, so that's the east. What about the west? Well, there's a few other VRPs when you go into the west. The first one I want to mention is Buckland, which is essentially a pair of lakes off to the northwest of the airfield here. Really, really visible. And actually, what's also brilliant is just to the north, and we can't see it well on this map, but there's a couple of chalk cliffs. I think it's possibly those. And if you can't see the lakes, you start flying towards the chalk cliffs and you will see the lakes soon enough. So there's Buckland here, and then there's the M23, M25 junction, which again is really, really visible. And this bridge, the M23 bridge, you can see for miles away. Even though the junction itself is in a bit of a valley, this bridge is really, really visible. There's a couple other VRPs not marked on the chart, but marked on the fixed wing procedures. One is North Reigate, which is, this is the town of Reigate here. And so they're saying just a point north of that, so a couple miles west of the motorway junction. And then you might also hear them asking you to report north of Beam the 80Z, which is a point just, what's that, like a half mile or so west of the motorway junction. Essentially, that'll be what they use when they're positioning you for a straight approach to runway 18. So you may hear those mentioned as well. And one other bit of airspace that's not really very well noted on this chart. You see it's got the ATZ for Redhill here. But in reality, there's what they call a local flying area here, which is this little fillet of airspace here. Which means when you're flying to or from Redhill, you can fly through this bit of the Gatwick CTR without requesting clearance, as long as you're flying to from Redhill to arriving or departing, essentially. Which makes it a bit easier, but this corner here is a popular place for pilots to infringe. And I think the real trick is when you're departing or arriving, just to make sure you turn as normal over these woods here. It's really visible. There's a sewage works here to the north, which you'll also be able to see. It's a really good turning point. And then to just make sure you track, just try and clip the edge of this built-up area here when you're going to or from Buckland. And it will just keep you out of this little corner of airspace. It's easy to infringe. If you're arriving from Buckland, clip the edge of here, and there's some really white buildings here at Salfords that I can show you on the map here. You see these white buildings, they're really obvious. So if you're just able to track from Buckland to the woods, and you also see the white buildings, that will keep you out of the airspace, which is around here. You'll also notice that this join is, this join, you have to have your eyes peeled so that you don't conflict with any traffic that's on downwind. Really don't over egg the pudding and end up making a base leg join, because you can end up kind of head on with some downwind traffic there. So that's the join here. And apart from that, once you get to these VRPs at Buckland and the motorway junction, generally once you get there, you probably want to climb up because there's some high ground in the vicinity. And the base controlled airspace in this area is 2,500, so I recommend going to maximum 2,300. And there's a couple of really good visual references in this area to kind of keep you in this little box here. First, you've got these two ridges here. The south one sort of marks the airspace boundary here, South East Railway Line, and the second one is really, really visible with the railway track running along the south of it and Dorking out to the east. In fact, let me show you that on Google Earth as well. There's the railway track, there's Dorking, and you can see this brown wooded ridge, and this is the second ridge. So the second ridge is inside controlled airspace. So you can use this ridge here to give yourself a bit of a buffer. Another reference that could keep you out of the London CTR is this little oval here just south of Epsom. It's not really marked on there as anything important, but that is the Epsom racecourse with this big grass green area in front of it and this big white grandstand. You can see it for miles around. And this is a really good marker for if you don't go any further north of there, then you'll be good to stay out of London CTR. And same with the disused airfield at Wisley, which is also where the Ockham or Oscar Charlie Kilo VOR DME is. And that's just a big disused runway, which I'm now trying to find from the sky. And I've got myself a bit disoriented. Heathrow, Leatherhead, there it is. And disused runway, and they've put some piles of earth and footpaths crisscrossing it, so it's not in use, and occasionally use it for storing various things. But it's really visible from the sky as well, so if you remain south of there and south of Epsom Racecourse, that will keep you clear of the London CTR. And also if you remain west of Epsom, that will keep you well away from Kenley. And then just be a bit careful if you route down towards Guildford VRP here, because it's very close to the new Farnborough airspace. And the Guildford VRP on the map is actually the railway station, which is kind of to the south of the built-up area. You know, it's this built-up area here that's kind of to the south, and really you don't want to be getting anywhere near to the northwest of this built-up area at all, because it's very close to Farnborough's airspace. So just be a bit aware. It's quite easy to see where the station would be, though. It's kind of in line with the ridge that runs east to west here. And you can normally pick up the river. And if all else fails, just head towards the south edge of the Guildford built-up area and you'll pick up the railway station soon enough. And that will help you stay clear of Farnborough. So, to conclude what I've said about arriving and departing from the west, just be a bit careful when you're going to and from Buckland here, to make sure that you skim the edge of Reigate to remain in the local flying area as depicted here. In fact, this is the one you really want to look at. Otherwise, there's a couple of VRPs, some that aren't mentioned, like North Reigate and North of the ATZ. But otherwise, once you get out to these VRPs, quite easy to climb, and then you've got some really good references once you get out into the local area like Epsom Racecourse, Wisley, and just be a bit careful around Guildford and use these ridges to your benefit. So that's generally how to avoid infringing when you're arriving and departing. The only other thing I want to mention is just when you're in the circuit. We've already mentioned about how you can use the farm here with the pond to mark your base leg on when you're landing on 3.6. When you're departing on 1.8, just make your left-hand turn once you're over the boundary and make sure you parallel those runways. Don't do a 90-degree base leg because then that will just put you into controlled airspace here. And other than that, the only other thing you've got to be really careful of is just your altitude, really. You want to be making your overhead joins at 1,400 feet, which is not very far away from Gatwick's airspace at 1,500. So you just have to bring your A game when it comes to altitude keeping when you do an overhead join into a Biggin Hill. And other than that, just make sure when you're in the circuit, you are at 1,200 in case there's anyone coming above you on the overhead join. And I know there's a lot to take in there, but all the information you can get from Redhill is really excellent. And I recommend just printing out a couple of these, have these on your knee board as you go in. Give yourself a really good briefing. Look at the wind as well. See if there's going to be a runway change to a more awkward runway or to a VRP you weren't expecting. And other than that, I recommend really, if you've never been to Redhill before, don't let any of this put you off. Plan well, plan properly, and then fly it accurately, and you'll have a lovely time when you get a really nice airfield to go and nerd out over some aviation. There's always tons of stuff going on there. The cafe is excellent as well. And if you're a student operating in or out of Redhill, now's the time after this video to show off to the instructor about how aware of the airspace you are. And if you're just PPL operating in and out of Redhill, then hopefully there are some tips that maybe you may not have used before. Any questions, any comments, you can comment down below. Email me at, people still use email, flywithfinn@gmail.com. You can follow me on Instagram and the same. Send me a message on there if you like. And let me know if you've got any questions. Thanks for watching this video.